Hi, Bill.
Hi, Jeff, and welcome to 999 Show. And today we're going to be talking about austerity and how we, as individuals and as a nation, are formed by austerity. And so we're going to be trying to just stay as positive as possible in this, and maybe not necessarily going into austerity as well. That means the doom and gloom, but sometimes it certainly does feel that way, when you are going to the checkout stand and you're buying groceries, and you really want those corn dogs, but you can't afford them, or you or whatever, and so you have to go like pick all these other choices of things, and then I always like what kind of it's hard. It's very hard to not have enough, and we're living in this world that is so expensive, and it's even more expensive now, I think, than it was. But I think I've heard statistically that during the
I like
height
the
of the
wording of what you said. It's very hard not to have enough. Think about
yes,
all of the like negations in that statement, which is sort of interesting with austerity itself, that the principle that you have to make do with less, or the fact that it's a state of being that you can't control. That's what I find so fascinating about how you said it. It's hard not to think, you know what I mean? Like, it's almost like once you get out of your own way and realize it's an idea of singularity and how you approach it versus the weight that it carries from that statement, it's almost more tolerable to imagine it because it
yeah,
is a path that you have to define, making do with less as opposed to more in a very dense way. When you have more, it's denser. When you have less, it's more
mhm.
Spartan, sparse. So you actually can maybe get more creative in your own self and in your own ability to craft, or even with recipes, with cooking. There are things that I notice that I can create with very disparate ingredients that taste really good. I know that doesn't sound like much with austerity. It kind of minimizes the importance of what it is we're
Well,
trying to talk
and
about, but
or if you think we're going to go down this path and they're going to introduce that 50-year mortgage into us, and that is like forcing austerity on people. But then there are ways to game that system, because if when you're renting, you're subject to the whims of your landlord for the most part, and you can't pack 20 people in a house to lower the rent down. But if you are buying a house for ownership, you might actually be able to, if within your agreement, your agreement is, if you, because I think they would say is that if you are in a 50-year mortgage, you're going to be paying on the interest for 20 years. But if you have an in your agreement that you're allowed to make principal payments, you could you could increase your family unit up from two people up to a higher amount, a higher amount. So if you like look at the Expanse, and the hero of the story, he had five parents, and so they because of overpopulation, they had to like have permits to see, you could, they had like male and female, like, yeah, five or six parents for one child to raise one child, and then they had to choose who was the biological one. And I don't know what they did. Maybe they did some science magic thing, and they combined their genetic elements all together so that that child was genetically, matched to all five of those people. That would be, that's something that's probably possible. But let's say we're not going to talk about that. But we're talking about,
that's interesting though, because that has that sort of replica effect, not in a eugenics way, but with the whole austerity bit, it kind of it's kind of representing of all our children. Who do we choose? Who's the chosen one? And that is an austere principle right there, because in so many ways, for whether it was the Gilded Age or whatever, I think we had to be looking at, it wasn't really entitlement, but only certain people could be on a certain path, um, where you had to choose this or that. And I think a lot of us are in that position now, and that's a form of austerity. But this sort of replica aspect of the things we can do with genes and genetics is
Yeah.
germane to this, because if it's that simple and we can make ourselves less austere in what we possess, maybe the
Mhm.
world around us could be better.
Well, and so in my original idea, thought with this is within a realm of scarcity that you can thrive and you can be with the right. I think it's a mindset, but maybe reason I have this mindset is that I grew up in an upper middle class family, and my father was a business owner, and in that time period, you grew up. I grew up in a neighborhood of everyone in this neighborhood were all business owners, and so you had a certain mentality. And welcome, JX1DX1, welcome. And so um, that's my mindset. And so I guess it's like if you look at some of the things that people talk about, and I'm kind of mindful sometimes when I talk to people because I come from that place, even though I've never lived in the upper middle class. I've been my entire life, I have been in the broke class, you know, and having like one time it was like I was my rent was what was my rent was like, and I lived in Seattle. I lived in a efficiency apartment. The bathroom was down the hall. When I moved in there, it was like, what was it, 370 a month for rent. That included the utilities. There was a closet, a sink, a refrigerator, one window facing inside at like a brick wall view.
Oh my
And
God. Wow.
that
Yeah.
wasn't just and then it was like 5-story building. This building that was it was a hotel in 1909. I loved living in this place, but it was like, and then every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, well, there's a little shed that was out there. I don't know. I think it was a tool shed or something. But every morning I was woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning by somebody up on the fifth floor pissing out the window, and you got that, and they pissed out the window, and that and that noise on that tin roof, blessings and Fatima and Cat welcome, and that was I woke up to that every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning for almost the entire 7 years that I lived there. Yeah, yeah, and but I loved living there, and but it was like because my rent was low, and
But you were
you
doing
know
more with less. You were doing more with less because you
yeah,
liked it, right?
yeah.
But you look back on it now and maybe you might be indifferent to it, or you don't know if you could go back to it, or maybe you miss it. See, and that's the thing about austerity is maybe when you're in it, you don't realize, for better or for worse, if there is
Yeah,
a for better or for worse. You know what I mean?
I guess the way I look at, let's say I'm maybe dreaming about the future of wanting like an Airstream to live in, and I would like to have like a hybrid truck if they make hybrid trucks. That's in my dream, and then I'm thinking, oh, and then I want to be a camp host, and because I love camping, and I know I'm sure I wouldn't like it after I was doing that. I would probably only like it for like 5 years, and then you stop liking it. But that's in a small area, kind of a thing like that. I think of the Airstream because they can be cleaned up and they don't look like homeless wagons, whereas like the old Winnebagos, and when they get past a certain number of years they tend to look kind of dingy, and so
Hmm.
you want to maintain, but you can get a used Airstream for for $10,000, $20,000 if you can muster that kind of cash, which is kind of hard, which is really hard to do when cash has been shrunk down to to what is available. But then I look at it, I'm thinking, on just on a side note, I'm thinking that all of this stuff is so illusionary, that's set by our system, and that cash is infinite because our cash is built out of debt.
Yeah, and what's funny is we think when you're living in debt, you're living in austerity. But what's interesting is it's almost platonic in a way, where the idea of beauty, the things that repeat, I think it's one of Plato's ideals about beauty, or it's one of those Greek philosophers that says that replicas and infinite beauty and things like that are actually what you're saying. So the stigmatism with debt is antithetical to the idea of the sort of stigma about austerity. You think people that are poor are living in austerity when they're in debt or when they can't afford anything, and it's actually philosophically not true.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you think about it, whether you're confined to the situation of being in lack, you principally have more,
Mm-hmm.
because even if you don't have a lot of something, there's something, whether it's a lot of debt or a lot of, paying this person to pay that, or incurring a lot of debt, it's going to sound really strange, but because of the repetition of something that you become inured to, or living in a certain circumstance, there's this deferential awareness that your lot isn't your circumstance. Whereas in other arenas where you have more, you want more and more and more and more and more and more and more, and more is never enough. So
Mm-hmm.
that's austerity too, because if you have a lack of happiness, what are you? You're empty. That's austerity.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, or, if you look at, like, well, it was like something my dad had told me, was that the more you do for yourself, the more power you have in the world. And so the more things you can just make with your hands and use your own labor, the more agency, or the more power that you have in that world, that
Mhm.
you're just making things for yourself, and you're making your own tools. Or because I was like ancient man, and they didn't have to, there was no Walmart to go into to get, or some Ace Hardware to get, oh, I need a new stone axe, I need a new axe. So you made your own axe.
Mhm.
Or if I
Mhm.
look at my father's people, stretching back to the 10th century in Sweden, were blacksmiths, and they were imported people. They were imported from Belgium, and that's kind of where those gypsy roots that I have. That, because like one of my great grandmother, she was a fortune teller. She read playing cards, and she read tea leaves. And so when she came to this country, she was, for a while anyway, she was giving people fortunes. And Tone, you want to make $1 million? Yeah, I do too. So if you have a few dollars, you can always invest your money in the stock market. And at this day and age, while our senators and all those people can trade stock, you just follow what they do, and then you can always make a lot more money. So they say. If you look at what Nancy Pelosi does, and what she invests her money in, those people make more money than everyone else does in the stock market. But that's either that or you just. I play the lottery and I don't get anyway. But what was I talking about? Oh, so they were these blacksmiths, and then when they came to this country in the 1880s, 1890s, they were blacksmiths in the Pacific Northwest, in the logging industry, and in the logging industry, and anyways, and so they were making the tools, they're on the spot. They were just making the tools that was necessary to bring down those big trees that were in this.
You're your own Lord, Savior, and Jesus Christ. I mean, you are the beginning and the end and all of it in between. And what I think is so interesting about as we go along here is that there's this sort of paradoxical nature to austerity, in the sense that it's you, but the paradox is the more it's austere, the more it's you. The more you've defined it, the more you're your own source, you know?
Well, it's that whole thing of being yes, Kat, I'm from the Pacific Northwest. So I've was born in Oregon, and I've lived in Oregon almost my entire life, except for a short time I lived in Seattle, Washington. And anyways, I guess I'd be real. What was I starting to say?
I lost.
I think we're talking about your own Savior and so forth.
Yeah, your own Lord, Savior, and Jesus Christ, and you're the beginning and the end. That type of thing.
Yeah, no, what I was saying,
you are the apocalypse and the rebirth. And
within the realm of Christian thought and philosophy of the whole co-creator thing, and you look at where that's kind of I think that the Madonna, this is the whole image that I think of when I think of like co-creator. And you have the creator and the co-creator and the creator and the co-creator. It's that whole Madonna image, and that you are bringing the world into existence, and you are part of the creative process, and so that you have, as we come into this world, that one of the gifts and tools and what that we were given was the ability to make our own way. Because if we look at the whole Adam, the Genesis 2 story, and you have and if we were to look at it in a Joseph Campbell way, where there was a tapestry of the unseen welcome, where there is no original sin. It's just, this is the kickoff to the journey. It's the kicker. And where you are being kicked from is a land of plenty into a land of austerity. And then in that land of austerity, you are going...
And actually, you're going further in the land of austerity, I think, than you are from the land of plenty. I actually agree with you.
You go from a place where all you have to do is just pluck apples or stuff off the trees, and you can feed your body, and you can do all the things, and everything is there provided for you, companionship, warmth, and everything. But then you get kicked out into this dark place of scarcity, and then it is your job to build your own world and build. And it's also, if you want to just look at it as a side note, different way of looking at it is like, why I don't know if you've been in into many casinos, but there's rarely are the regular there are rarely very many regular casino goers below the age of 50, because most people above the age of 50 is they come into a place where they have a disposable income. They don't have children they have to take care of anymore. Their houses are paid for if they've had if they've had houses, and then they can feel like I can go to this casino and I can drop money into these slot machines or
And
play,
that's austerity right there,
or
actually,
or
because yeah,
yeah, so
gambling,
you
it's considered a decadent sin, but in some ways, when you consider the mass ageism that is attached, or the ageist mentality about gambling that you're pointing to, there's a certain austerity to it, despite it being considered one of the seven deadly sins and very decadent. Because if you can be in a position where you're not worried about money, or I shouldn't say it that way, you have the disposable income, as you say, but you also are in a place where you're not fretful, then that whole spiritual component of living in lack isn't taking place. And that is, it's austerity, like redone it redefines the whole idea of austerity in a place where you think you've gotten to where you are. You don't have to worry about the idea of trying to keep up with the Joneses in money. You can play, and you can play with real money, not monopoly money, and feel like you're empowered.
yeah
Whereas younger people, it's a problem, it's an addiction, and they're living in a place of depravity. And depravity is often associated with austerity nowadays because of a consumer culture that's gone completely awry, um,
yeah
for a lot of different reasons. So, no, I
well, I
agree
mean,
with you.
it's like when I was bartending, I had the money. These are all losing scratch tickets. So you remember that I made you a deck of those
Mhm.
crosswords. It came from my my being not in a place of austerity, but having plenty. And I have a lot more of these. But when I stopped bartending and I started taking care of my mother, I went right back into a place of forced austerity on me, of having no money in my, or very little amounts of money into my diet. And then so this was the first thing that went. I wasn't buying any more of these damn lottery tickets. And but but then again, I always looked at the state lottery as a voluntary tax, and I'm giving back what has been given to me. And because I the whereas the going into a casino and gambling, I always told people that when I was like that I am well, I have pilgrim roots. My mother's people came over on the Mayflower, and I'm just giving back what we stole. So I'm paying the tribal tax that, and we have these tax collection centers, and they're called casinos. And sometimes you get a tax return. And granted, well, it's a side note. Sorry, uh, I got the opportunity to play a brand new slot machine. And it was after I accidentally spilled a beer um, into one of those tabletop Game King machines. They have like Keno. They have they have a few non
You wrapped into one. Yeah, I know what
yeah.
you mean.
And then while the tech person, it's like one of my neighbors is the supervisor for the people who fix those machines in that casino. And then another neighbor he retired from that casino as an electrician. And then he was, I guess he was probably the supervisor. That must have been like the head of maintenance. And then my dad retired from that casino too, even, and so it's like, okay, this is the only employer here. But nevertheless, I spilled a beer into this slot machine by accident, and they were cleaning it up. And I said, but see, they have, it has like a little tray in there. But I said, well, why don't you open it up and clean that beer out? And he said, oh, I don't need to. But then he did, and it short circuited the machine. And then they had to do a hard reset on the machine, and effectively wiped the entire memory out of it. I don't know how many years of, I think it was probably like 2 years of data that was in it, because that was in it, and it just wiped it clean, and it was like a brand new machine. Well, you know what? I played $100 on that machine for like 6 weeks, and I got like several. I didn't get any hand pays. I never got a hand pay, but I got several. Like I would put $20 in, and then I'd play for like 6-7 hours on $20, and that was over a course of 6 weeks. That machine, because that was like because it took about 6 weeks for it to accumulate enough data to get the payout, because these were these are a type of slot machines that are like the Las Vegas slot machines, where they're not on individual servers. Now they do have those in Washington State. They have, because the Washington State casinos are required by law to pay out a certain amount of money every single month, and so they odds on them slide throughout the month. And so if you go there and down at the bottom of the month, you may be more likely to win a jackpot out of a slot machine than you were at the bottom of the month. And but the slot machines in the state of Oregon,
algorithmic, Bill.
Yeah, it is. The slot machines in the state of Oregon are not that way, because they have a payout, and it's like these things. These scratch tickets are on like I think for every dollar you put into it, you're supposed to get 80 cents back along the long run of it. So so it's not like, it is a rigged system, but it's not.
That's austerity.
Yes, it is. But we're talking about that. We're talking about not, but that's this side note that with it's just a story that was like not related to what we're talking about, but just something that I just remembered right now.
The other
Anyways,
thing I think about too is cheapness and austerity. Like the people that are hoarding their money, like the Four of Pentacles. There's something austere about that card, because it's like they're holding on to their money, and they're holding on to what values mean the most to them. And yet by the same token too is that paradigm or paradox again about that push and pull, about holding on to something or letting it go. And I think that ties into the whole idea about progress, and is austerity the enemy of progress in some ways? And I don't know if I believe that it is, based on some of the things that we talked about tonight, which show a great deal, even in the just 25 minutes we've been doing this, that show that austerity actually can mean progress in some ways. Progress and creativity, and
it may be that it's like, okay, you go from Egypt and you go out of and cross the Red Sea, and you go into the desert, and you wander around for 40 years, and that's, you get the 10 Commandments there, you get your marching orders, but you can't really go into this promised land quite yet. You have this post-Edenic period.
There's
that you have to,
yes,
and then but then what you have to learn while you're there is that God will provide all that you need for the day. And so this manna from heaven, and then if you try to store it up, it just rots and goes.
Right.
And then
I'm agreeing with all all your points tonight, and I don't always, but I think that there's something to be said for the belief in faith and austerity. There's something
Mhm.
very austere about faith, um, because it presupposes that there is lack, but in that lack, in that whole manifestation angle, and or the idea that there's hope, it's not trickery to believe in these things that could come out of
Mhm.
austerity, right?
Yeah. And so like when I go out and look into nature, I've learned a lot about spirituality since the pandemic. And since I was like the restaurant that I was working at was shut down by I think it was like March 16th, 2020, something like that. I think that was when it was shut down. And but it had already started to shut down as soon as that COVID virus had hit the continental United States. And then because people weren't going out as much and everything, and then people were getting paranoid and everything, and then the money that I was making just sort of just shrunk up, and and then I was just like I wasn't making anything. It was going behind, and but it's like since then, and coming home and pretty much staying on this piece of property, I did go do a job of work from home for about a year, and then that ended. And then the last time that I could have worked was like um, was before mother got the COVID the first time, and that was like in what I was almost 3 years ago. So it was 3 years ago. Right now was the last time I could have worked. But nevertheless, I was out watching the animals, and watching my dog, watching the dog, watching the behaviors of the animals and the birds and all these things. And then I think, well, wait, they're getting by just fine without all this stuff that we have and we think that we need. And I'm thinking,
That's
are
why
they?
ultimately we could self-destruct before they could. I think there's something to be said for years and years and years of progress that in some ways fosters austerity in the sense that you don't have to go out and do stuff. You can make your own living at home. There's something that is almost coming full circle about the way we live, I think, that is going to involve multiple income streams where each of those is austere. And you're not going to have the same sense of security. There's some austerity in that, in the sense that you're going to have to draw more on your creativity and be more ingenious. That comes from a place of austerity.
Yeah.
But with COVID, what was really interesting is the the mental illness aspect and the thought of being alone with your own thoughts created a really schizophrenic sort of atmosphere where I think people alone with their thoughts and out of the consumerism, I think that created an austerity of fear, and that's the other side of this coin, because if you don't have consumerism and yet you still are always trying to keep up, where does all of this end in our own self-destruction, right?
Mm.
Because soon, with AI and everything that could usurp the roles that we do have and or redefine them, and we don't know where to go with it, that's going to be a real challenge for the future of austerity and what austerity is going to mean to humanity.
Well, we may end up going into a realm of prosperity instead.
We might be.
I guess it's that whole thing of that whole dark enlightenment, that there may be a sense of a new age of a renaissance, but at the same time, the Dark Ages is just a flip away. So
I
maybe
feel like that's what's first.
maybe
Yeah.
we never left the Dark Ages.
Maybe we let. Oh my God, yes. And there's austerity in darkness. Oh
You know,
yes, yeah.
and we're in that we have that flip, and then when you
And
look
that
at your,
duality of the Enlightenment and that idea, of that Renaissance,
I mean,
is
you
that
know,
duality.
how often have you been really super spiritually connected to yourself, and then you go out and sabotage all of that with one of your dark habits, or whatever you think is a dark habit, or whatever. It's like, well, we can keep going on this path, and you're on this sense, but it's like, oh, I can't handle this feeling. Where is this gonna go? And
Yeah,
so
yeah,
then you go and you shut all that down, or whatever. And I think that's part of that whatever that spirit is that we have within us. I don't know that I don't believe in original sin anymore, and I don't think I ever did. But I do know that there's something within us that we have to that we are have to fight against. I guess that's where they talk about that whole sense of depravity, and I'm not so sure I believe in that either. But I really have struggled with that. I struggled with that when I was going to studying theology at that Quaker university. I struggled with the whole concept of depravity, but maybe it's because I don't think that Paul was a good example to follow. And I think that's what it is that I
uh,
do.
the wrong sort of parable. It should go the other way. Like what you're saying is he
Yeah,
was the wrong sort of person on that mission.
yeah.
And, yeah,
It may be that Pauline Christianity is not the right kind of Christianity to be following at all if we're looking at it as a spiritual path. And now I've just gone someplace else. But it's that, because if you just look at maybe the Gospel of Thomas, now there is some elements of that I don't like, or you look at what they would think would be the core teaching,
you're
and
right. Yeah, it's like the prostitution of our will, Bill. It's in modern society to whore ourselves out to eke out an existence just to subsist. It's almost like that's the decadent end of it, and that is not austerity, and that's what we're forced to live in. It's sort of the reverse idea, like we're
yeah,
whores on some
yeah.
level.
We come from a place of prosperity, which is spirit world, and we're cast into this
Right on.
bodies, and
Yeah.
that's that sense of going out of Eden and into this desert, and you have a bunch of skills that were that are given to you. I guess it was like one of those, and then your job is to tame that beast that exists within. I guess that's where they would come in to say that that's what the depravity of humanity is, but it's not. It's just it's what it is. It's what we inherited from the animal kingdom.
Hmm. And I think the austerity of prostitution is why they on some level believe it should be legal because it's not sin on some
Mm-hmm.
level because it's been a bastardization to make women look worse for something that's been going on the oldest profession in ages or for what is it the oldest profession since the beginning of time.
Well,
and
it's
that's
just a.
austere. Something old sounds austere or smoky or musty or
Mhm.
gross or
Yeah. Well, I don't.
unseemly.
I couldn't imagine um, using a prostitute for any reason, but I couldn't imagine doing that. But I don't. At the same time, I don't really condemn people that do, because have a what sits at my, so I have a bit of a libertarian kind of a bent to me. And so it's like, you live free there, and there's a sense of a freedom. And so, like, there's like the debates that have been going on with people, I think, on social media, about people who are on like SNAP benefits, and that, oh well, they shouldn't be allowed to buy this and that and that. And I said, well, the restriction they made is no alcohol and no tobacco. And then beyond that, it's a very libertarian approach, because as when I was like listening to a debate on the universal basic income, and a libertarian came in and said, well, yeah, the more libertarian approach is to give somebody this sum of money and give zero restrictions on what to do with it. And so if you went out in a weekend and you blew the whole thing on prostitutes and cocaine or whatever, well, it's on you. And then, but then you don't get, if you want to eat, well, sorry, you already blew your money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And this idea of the reversal of blowing your money, blowing your whole wad, blowing your whole loot, whatever, uh, at once, in the decadence, putting you into austerity, or is it depravity, or is it, it's kind of the whole Paul thing again, because in the libertarian point of view, and I don't know how this goes as far as legislating or trying to legislate um, moral codes or that sort of thing. I don't know what the libertarian stance on religion is, but I think it's probably better than either the Democrats or the Republicans, because there's this idea of complete decadence in conspicuous consumption on one side, and then on the other side there's this, like, we want to take care of you, we don't want you in austerity, but yet we define kind of what that is, and then one side bastardizes the other approach of the other, and then we have more conflict that way. So
well,
interestingly enough, politics has its elements of austerity too.
yeah. Well, it's there's do-gooders on both the right and the left who would say people should not be allowed to buy lottery tickets.
Mm-hmm.
The lottery. I've talked with people who are both, either they're on the left or they're on the right, who want to say that this is not something that people should be doing because it's poor people who buy that. Well, so what? Most poor people don't pay any taxes,
Right.
and then this is a way to participate in the system. And so it would be, my thought would be like, okay, you need some more money. Well, then just do another lottery game, because it's yeah, okay, you're going to have a certain number of people who are going to get addicted to it. Yeah, but people get addicted to everything. I mean, if you go look at your life, how many addictions do you have in your life? I mean, how many things are you addicted to? How much, your social media, or you're addicted to this, or you're addicted to that, or you're addicted to sugar. Everybody is hardwired addicted to sugar who comes in.
Yeah, I feel like that's another thing too, is that there are forms of addiction that are austere, and they don't necessarily have to be bad addictions. They can be good addictions, but yet they still have a stigma to them because of the austerity tone. Like, if you're someone that is a chronic masturbator and you're however many years old, there's an austerity and simplicity of that. You're not contracting anything, you're not giving anything, and yet you're still pleasing yourself to the highest level. So I think that on some level, there's this myth about, it comes back to the same thing in the first 10 or 15 minutes we talked about, which was a revelation for me, that the connotation that something is austere, is less or not substantive, is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And couldn't be further from the truth, because sometimes uh, a connotation in meaning or connotation of something is directly against what you think you're opposing. Meaning, like, the very meaning that you assign something, and this is just a philosophical sort of aside, is in direct opposition to what you really, really want inside. And I think what we want and what we need is that blend, or that tightrope we walk between understanding austerity doesn't mean living in lack, but it also has its meaning, spirituality of getting more for us, that could bring the things that we in consumer culture think we need more and more of. And we can probably have it for ourselves and feel better about ourselves than the collective might feel right now, if we can build upon our own austerity.
Well, yeah, it's like how many tarot decks do you actually need?
Like right now, I have about 40.
You have 40.
But I don't
Yeah,
want any more. I mean, I
I
feel
have,
like I can't do anything with any more.
in celebration of the art fair, I have 3 coming, and but they're mostly oracle decks. But then this is the only deck I read with. I just read with this keyword deck that I bought used, and then it's like, do I really need all those other ones? But maybe they have different nuances to them. But if the guidebook on them is exactly the same as the other one, and they don't really go into the nuances of those systems, then they're really not any different than Lila. I was just using that as an example. They're I'm getting a money and finance oracle deck, because it's like I have relationship ones, and when people come and ask me those money and finance questions, I have no you know that's kind of what I was like looking at, and so I wasn't exactly going there, but in the discussion of how many tarot decks do you actually need as a tarot reader, and of course everyone just says you just need one. You need the one that works for you. But I have multiple ones. I mean, this is probably my new favorite one. Though we weren't talking about tarot here. This is just a stack of playing cards with images of saints and everything else like that on it, and then of course there's my the ones that I've made myself. But I guess that one of the things that in talking about austerity is using what you have, but there's also a sense of thriving in a place of scarcity, because you are using what it is that you have, or you are spending time making what you need. And so if I let's say, like, look at my one of the shows that I like is Alone, that's put on by the History Channel. I haven't watched all the seasons of it, but in my collection I have the 6th season, maybe it's the first nine. Yeah, I have the first 9 seasons, and there's a whole good night, Fatima.
Night,
and and
Fatima.
and so the contestants, they go out they're dropped off into the wilderness. They are their own camera people, and you could choose in one of your 10 items to bring like a week's ration of food if you wanted to, but then maybe you don't really want to do that, because you'd rather have a saw and an axe,
Mm-hmm.
and then a bow and arrow, or you want to have a flint and steel for making fire, and then and then you have these limited number of items, and then you get cast out into the wilderness, and then the last person standing is the one who wins the $500,000. But most people, a lot of the people, they leave early on. The people who, maybe they have a medical concern that kicks them out, or whatever, or they you go from you go from being in camp, you're there for weeks, learning how to use the camera equipment, and they feed you, and making sure that and then you're in this social environment, and then the game starts. They drop you off on a helicopter or a boat on your plot of land, and well, let's see what happens. and then you go into that point of where you're not just Adam and Eve, you're just Adam or Eve. You're Adam or Eve, and you are alone. And the only time you get to see somebody is once a week, when they stop by to pick up the memory cards for the camera. They give you more batteries. They check your medical stats to see if you're still healthy enough to do this job, but that's the only human contact you get. And then you get that camera, you get to talk into it. That's your journal, that's your diary. And then they every week they go over and they look over that footage, and then occasionally you'll get a phone call from the satellite phone they give you, say, hey, John, you're not recording enough stuff. You need to record more. And we don't have enough from you. And so then maybe that's the other contact you get. But you're there, and you got to try to make fire. You got to try and hunt. And what usually happens is that when you go on this diet of a squirrel every other day, you lose weight really, really fast. You go hungry.
Yeah.
And you're hungry, and you're alone, and the people who don't have the right mental fortitude, they're thinking, this ain't worth it. And then that game is done. And then that's that whole sense of where I have really got the first idea for the show to talk about austerity was from that show. And then watching the people who have the mental fortitude. And one of the things I have seen that's very interesting is that in only the 9 seasons I've watched,
there's something interesting about what you're saying too, about where you think there's weakness, or where you think there's strength, there's actually lack that leads to a greater strength from austerity. And what you're saying, you don't realize that in your own lack. I hate the whole thing about it brings character, but that's the only thing that's coming to mind right now. But one of the things with it is the more you're in that austerity, you're in a greater place physically, mentally. And it's not about having sacrificed. I think that's the case of a lot of people. I can't have this, and I can't get this, and I don't have this. Austerity doesn't have to mean that, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I have seen is that the people who feel like they are the most equipped are actually the least equipped to handle the whole austerity of being alone and just with yourself. So the people who were career military people, maybe they had all that survival training, but the thing is in the military, you're never alone. I never served, but my father served. My father served in the military, and so the ones who never, like, I think it was like season 7 or 8, the $1 Million Challenge. The guy who won was a loner. And that's what we're going to talk about next week is being like the whole lone wolf type of thing, or the feeling like you don't necessarily belong in this world. And because I know when I was like younger, I felt like I was born into the wrong time, because I felt like that I would have been one of those type of people who would have greatly benefited from having an arranged marriage, having my
Yes.
marriage arranged by my folks, and that way I didn't have to worry about it because of my lack of social skills and everything else, and because the whole romance thing, you see it that's only because most that's just a short part of time in your marriage. Maybe I'm just completely mistaken, but nevertheless, I felt like I was born in a wrong time. But there was a sense of also being you're kind of all self-contained in yourself, and you are your own marital partner, and so those people who win that contest, that's the type of person they are. They're very well self-contained within themselves. And the guy who won the $1 million challenge, he made it out 100 days. Well, he lived his whole life that way, his whole adult life, and that and very very much so. Never married, never didn't have any children. He was very much self-contained, and so that's kind of that sense of how do you exist in a world, that kind of a world. Kat, my father was in the military before he got married, and so he essentially was in graduate school. He was working on a PhD in physics, and he decided that it wasn't for him. Without telling anybody, he dropped out of school and he volunteered into the Army. And then when he was getting ready to go into basic training, he calls his mom up, his parent, and said, "Hey, I'm not making it home for Christmas. Oh, and by the way, I dropped out of graduate school and I joined the Army, and I'll be back in a couple of years." And then he went off, and which kind of in because his mom was the first was it his dad was a first generation American from Sweden, and his mom came over from Sweden when she was 8 years old, and his mom wanted the social cred of having a son as a college professor. And for her, those dreams were just smashed in that moment when he dropped out of school and went into the military, which was not something that would have happened. He would have, and he went into the military in the Vietnam era, but it was before the first a shot was ever fired. But I think it was in a time when the French were involved in Vietnam. America hadn't into it yet, and so he was in there, and he spent his entire service time in Germany, and he was on the missile crews. Because he was a mathematician, they had him fixing the missiles. They were like Scud missiles. They were on those mobile launchers, the mobile launch missiles, and so he was on the Eastern Front between West Germany and East Germany, and that's what my father did in the military. It was that, because of the way he tested, but he didn't become an officer. He could have, I guess. I don't think that. But he was also kind of a lone wolf kind of a person, and he couldn't handle that military life. That military life just was not for him. But anyway, one of my lights just burned out, and so camera light, yeah.
That's austere.
Yeah, because change the shadow from that side, from this side to this side. I usually turn 2 lights on, but I just wasn't thinking straight. And we've been on for an hour, and I've had a fun time here talking with Jeff, and we'll be back next week, and we're going to be talking about that whole sense of born in the wrong world, because we were just kind of thinking about that, and because both of us have had that kind of an experience, and and in a sense, and we were talking about some other things of that sense of being that individual who, I don't know, I was this individual that when you were in grade school and they were choosing up teams for dodgeball, it was like, oh God, Bill was the last person picked. Oh, I guess I got to have Bill on my team. Oh, now we're going to lose for sure with Bill because Bill has no athletic skill.
Same.
Yeah, see,
Yeah.
I knew that. I knew that about you, and so that
Same.
was my reality. For a short time, man, I was one of the best chess players in McMinnville, Oregon. When I had moved there, it was after college, playing chess in the coffee shops in the 90s. I was one of for a short time, until this kid who got to be like 12 or 13 years of age. Then he became like the the best best player in town, but yeah. So anyway, I don't know if we kind of explored the topic of austerity today. We'll probably come back to it later in the future, because I think that whole notion, maybe we'll think about it a little bit better, and then if you all have any ideas.
The idea too, this is just one final thing I want to say. The idea with the whole SNAP benefits and the idea of survival of the fittest, the people that are exerting their will to try to create austerity for other people can't do it because they themselves couldn't live in it. So that to them is the ultimate fear. And they're trying to impose that fear. And unfortunately, though, when you've got 5 children and, you can't really live in that philosophical a place to be really concerned when you're trying to survive. So I really feel like that's a really, really dark place to be in, as far as what austerity has to mean to somebody, because that is sacrifice right there. That is in the the most perverse or perversion of the idea of austerity, because from little things and from some small things and from suffering, or from their idea is sadist, because from suffering they say things can come that are good. But the fact that a government can exert its will on you and exert austerity, when you're seeing what you're seeing on the other side with them, is a pretty dark place to be in. So it's good that we had this talk tonight, because I think we've lost sight of a lot of things, but sight is something to behold when we have these talks, Bill, especially about things like this. The darkness doesn't seem as dark if we realize that austerity isn't necessarily light. It doesn't have to be a blight.
Well, I was like, when the other day when I was using my SNAP benefits, and I was shopping at a high-end grocery store, and this is a high-end, and having listened to people who complain about people on SNAP shopping at high-end grocery stores. Well, I shop completely in the bulk section, because I know how to cook, and I know how to make things from scratch. And so I used those benefits well to buy things like nutritional yeast and almond flour and red lentils, and and stuff like that. And you buy things without a package, and then they're all cheaper. And so I know that, because a lot of people who don't don't really know how to cook, or they're just locked into one kind of schema. It's like, oh, it's you're having barbecue, or you're having this or that. But being that like one of the most important survival skills a person can have is to learn how to cook, but not just learn how to cook. Learn how to cook vegan, even if you're not vegan. Learn how to feed yourself from vegetable sources, because it's like I know it's better for my body. I like hamburgers way better than I like lentil burgers, but I feel better after eating a lentil burger
Me
than I do
too.
after
I
eating
don't always
a
do it.
hamburger, and so I'm trying to like, drop like 20-30 pounds, so this shirt that once belonged to my father, that I can actually button it up all the way down, and I don't look like a sausage when I'm wearing it, But anyway, nevertheless, and this is a jacket that once belonged to a dead man, and it fits me because he was a larger person at that time. Anyway,
When you say once belonged to a dead man, was he in it, or her? Was she in it in their?
no,
Was it their sartorial garb in their casket?
it wasn't. He was in it. He was wearing it when he was still alive, and then his wife, like 6 months after his I think it was almost a year after his passing, decided that it was time to get rid of her ex-husband, her husband's clothing. And my aunt, when they come down to Oregon to go visit, they don't stay at our house because my housekeeping skills are really terrible, and so if my housekeeping skills were really good, then they would come and stay at our house. But they don't do that anymore. And, and they stayed at Salem, and so that's where these clothes came from. So yeah, that's kind of funny. So it's like, I need to, when I win the lottery, I'll buy myself a robot housekeeper. My robot AI companion, and
I like my Roomba.
anyways, that's another story. I probably shouldn't. I talk too much. Anyways, I probably talked a lot here, but I know that I had a good time here talking with Jeff, and I hope that all you guys had a good time. But I wanted to say out there is that we're gonna come into this austerity thing again. If you have any ideas, please leave them as a comment when this video posts, when it completely uploads, which will be like 20 hours from now. And Jeff has his book, and so we'll when this video posts or completely posts, we'll put a link in the comments or in the I should put a link in the description to his book.
Can I
and
put,
then
Bill, can I throw this on Substack?
Yeah, absolutely. Once it loads, when it downloads, you can absolutely. So you can throw them all on, because you're part of it too. And so you've got the bandwidth to store it on your device. You can upload the whole thing to Substack. Yeah. And but nevertheless, if you have any ideas for austerity and what that means to you, that way we can think about what you guys think, and we can incorporate that into the next time we come on this topic, because we'll probably hit it again, because Advent is coming up really soon. And so we'll meet next week, which we'll talk about like this born in the wrong world, born in the wrong body, the whole lone wolf kind of a thing next week. And then then the next following Thursday is Thanksgiving, and then we'll not meet on that day because I don't know what I'm going to do.
Okay.
And then we'll come back. When we come back, it's Advent, and we'll talk a little bit about. We'll just go into and go do that. And so Maria says she wants a cleaning robot too. I think everybody wants a cleaning robot. Because it's everybody's least favorite thing to do, but everybody likes a clean house. But then again, you can just be like me and wish that you lived in that other world that had a dirt floor and a cabin in the woods with a dirt floor. You lived in a cave. Self-cleaning home. Yes, cat, a self-cleaning home. Absolutely. So yeah. So any ideas about this topic, austerity, please leave them in a comment. And then if you have any ideas about born in the wrong world, when I post that video, the link to that live stream, you can also leave like pre-comments on it, and then we can see about incorporating those ideas into these shows as well. And Lila wants a cottage in the woods. Yeah. Well, I live in a cottage in the woods pretty much. I got that going. All right. Well, thank you very much. And we'll see all y'all next week for another one of these rambling talks. Bye.
Bye.